Welcome, everyone. I'm Jeffrey Goodman, Director of Marketing and Development for the YMCA of Northwest Louisiana. We're here at 318 Latino Studios for Shreveport-Bossier, my city, my community, my home. And absolutely can't wait to have today's discussion. Our guest is Greg Powell. Greg?
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. So, my first question for you is, talk to me about how you came up with the idea of social bike rides, or SB rides, as most people know it.
Okay, well, it's there's a long story, and
give it to me.
I always try to give credit where credit is due. I actually graduated from Xavier University, and I'm
gonna interrupt. And went to Eden Gardens, went to Middle Magnet, went to Loyola, and then graduated from Xavier.
Yes, graduated from Xavier University 2001. Matter of fact, I sent a shout out to Xavier University. This is our 100-year anniversary. So started in 1925, so 100 years this year. So it's a big year for the university. Proud graduate of the university, and I'm the president of the alumni chapter in North Louisiana. And so I spent a lot of time at the university. Homecoming's always a big deal. And I saw these bicycle rides during homecoming. And as it turns out, the gentlemen that run the bicycle company in New Orleans called Get Up and Ride, shouts out to Nick and Blake. They they started a bicycle tour company a couple of years before. This is like 2017 or so. And I saw it. And it was amazing. It was nighttime. The bicycles were lit up, and they had a group that was riding on Tuesday nights that was like 300-400 bikes deep. And I had an opportunity to speak with Nick and Blake, and they kind of talked to me about how they got started, and it was totally organic. They just wanted something different to do. They were tired of maybe going out to the club and going to bars and stuff like that. So a group of friends just got together and started riding bikes, and it kind of just ballooned out of control. So they ended up buying some bikes so that people who didn't have bikes could kind of join in with them. But they originally just started out just riding bikes. It kind of blew up, and then they started kind of renting bikes out of necessity. So that wasn't exactly what happened to me, but I saw it, had an opportunity to ride with them and kind of understand what they were doing. I didn't have a crew of people that wanted to ride. So when I started as a business first, which was the direct opposite of what they did. But so I thought it would be an interesting way to have some fun and enjoy Shreveport in a different way, because people are always saying it's nothing to do. And that was the basic premise of me starting SB Rides, was just to have an alternative way to go out and have fun in a new way, in a different way. That was healthy. It really wasn't about exercise. It was just something different to do.
Communal, right?
And it just, bicycles bring people together. And as I've gotten deeper and deeper into the bicycle world, there's a saying in the bike world that bicycling will save the world. And it's one of those things that just a bicycle brings people together from all different walks of life. And I fell in love with it, and I've been trying to promote it and just show people just how much fun you can have just doing something as simple as riding a bike.
And you started buying bikes, right? You have a whole crew of bicycles.
I have a storage full of bikes. I probably have about 50 bikes, but the max bike tour, bike party ride is 20. So it's going to take special circumstances to go over 20 bikes, but 20 bikes is a lot of bikes. It's a lot of bikes, and it's a lot of fun. So I enjoy doing it, but I've picked up bikes, some used bikes, some new bikes. We try to get bikes as inexpensively as possible. A lot of people have given me bikes, and it has just allowed us to, going on 6 years now. Our anniversary will be in 4th of July weekend.
Congratulations.
Will be 6 years of putting people on bikes and having fun.
And all these bikes have LED lights on them?
All the rental bikes are beach style, single speed cruisers, coaster brake. Simple, old school bike. They all have LED lights in the wheels, and when you go on a bike tour or a bike ride hosted by me, I generally have a speaker where we can play music. And so when I do private tours, that's what I do mostly, are private tours. We can have rock and roll, we can have blues, we can have Southern soul, we can have gospel music. Some of the, I've serviced thousands of people over these 6 years, and some of the best rides I have had have been just, families getting together and playing like gospel music. So whatever your feeling is, whatever your genre of music that you like, I can provide that. And I know I've actually heard this before. People think that, oh, you have to be black to come out and ride a bike, but you don't have to be black to ride a bike. You can come out with whoever you want to ride bikes with, and we're going to have a good time. So I'm from Shreveport. I've been here all my life. So I can take you in the Sandbar. I can take you into Hayes on Texas. I can take you to the casino. I can take you wherever your group wants to go. If your group wants to go to church, we're going to pull up to the church. So that's what I do.
And two questions are, your tours can be any time of day. They don't have to be just at night.
They don't have to be at night. So,
and what's the best place for someone to find you or book a tour? Your website or your Facebook?
Google bicycle tours Shreveport. SB Rides will be the first thing to pop up. So the website is socialbikerides.com, www.socialbikerides.com. I mean, you will find us instantly. If you can't remember the name, you can't remember anything, if you just simply Google bicycle tours, bicycle rental in Shreveport, it will be the first thing to pop up.
All right. So tell me, my next question for you is just tell me some about 515 Pierre Avenue. Okay. So 515 Pierre Avenue is at some point going to be the hub for SB Rides. It's on the edge of downtown. It's in the Allendale neighborhood. A lot of bicyclists ride in that area. Most of the people riding bikes in that area aren't riding for fitness. They're riding as their primary mode of transportation. Allendale is very hilly, but it's close to downtown. And I have some old family-owned property that I acquired, which is at that location. Yeah, give me a little of the history. I know a little bit of it, but share a little bit of the history of 515. I think it goes back at least 2 generations.
It goes back three generations. 4. It goes back 4 generations. My great-grandfather actually initially owned that land, but nothing was on the land, I don't believe. And he owned that land since the early 50s. I believe since the early 50s. But my grandfather acquired the land from his father and put his law office there. And he also built a gas station on that. It's a big lot. So he built a gas station, which was an Esso gas station, which was what Exxon is today. Esso is in Canada, Exxon is what's here, but it used to be Esso Standard Oil.
ESSO.
Right, ESSO. And so it's got the same colors as Exxon. So it's really cool. So in 1956, that was a happening gas station. And his law practice was behind it. My father ended up taking over that land when he came back to Shreveport. My father is a retired physician, so his doctor's office was in the law practice, and when the medical practice kind of got bigger, he brought both of the buildings together. So it looks like one building, but it's actually 2 buildings.
And when he came back to Shreveport,
from DC, my father went to medical school in Washington, DC. He graduated from Howard University. He actually graduated from Xavier University, but he graduated from Howard Medical School. Okay. My grandfather graduated from Howard Medical School as well. Okay. So they're both Howard graduates. So my grandfather graduated from Howard Law. My father graduated from Howard Medical School. So kind of school tradition. Xavier University and Howard, kind of a family tradition in terms of that. So his medical practice was there. They didn't use the gas station part. It was they just parked files and just miscellaneous stuff used to be in the gas station side. But when I had the opportunity to buy the building, which I ended up buying the building from a nonprofit that had come into possession of the land, I bought the building and the land back from the nonprofit, and I felt like it was so close to downtown and so close to Texas Avenue, which are getting a lot of resources. I felt like it's close enough to downtown. It's storage space. It's historic. It has, family history. I think it'll be the perfect place
Huge
for me.
family history.
Right. It'll be the perfect place for me to start bicycle tours from. It's in an area that is poised for rejuvenation. So I felt like I would just be ahead of the curve to put money in that area, because it's an area that is kind of being looked over, but I didn't know anything about 50 Cent G Unit Studios, but that's pretty much right up the street from me at this point. And so the more resources that go into that area where G Unit Studios will be, the more residual I'll be able to get.
Perfect.
And it's actually at the foot of where I-49 will come through. I-49 stops at the beginning of that area, but when I-49 does come through, I'll be right there in that area. And I don't believe there's any reason for me to get like bought out for right away. I won't be getting bought out for right away, but I'll probably be in a good area where a lot of traffic will be for construction when that time comes.
Yeah, well, I think sounds like you're in a good spot, and
it's a good spot.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, for people that don't know, you've led bike tours focused on Black history for our local Juneteenth celebrations.
Yes.
And recently, you were the tour guide for the MLK 318 Dreamfest guided bus tour.
Right.
So my questions for you are: tell me about some of these tours, some of the sites you take people to. And I'm asking that because I listened to one interview and you were about to give the tour and you wouldn't let out the secrets. And then the other part of this question is, I'm curious, just tell me a little about who taught you our local Black history, how you came to know it and learn it.
Well, you live history. We all actually live history. Being from Shreveport, I'm 46 years old. There are a lot of things I just remember. If you're about my age, you can remember when I-49 was built. You can remember when Uri Drive was nothing but cotton fields. We used to go to New Orleans a lot, so I remember driving down Highway 1 to get to New Orleans. So it was never about Black history. It just so happens that my family has a rich history here in Shreveport, and I know my family history. And so, I'm Black, so I can't help but understand these stories. But history is history. History doesn't really have a color. When I started the bicycle tours, it was just organic because we were trying to figure out what was my company. SB Rides was like a bike party. Most people didn't want a tour. Most people just wanted to go to bars or clubs or restaurants, have a good time. They didn't necessarily want any historic value. But in order to run a good business and be as accommodating to all my potential clientele, I wanted to learn more. There was really no space for bicycle parties. My mentors I don't think they were calling themselves a bicycle tour company. But in New Orleans, there are a lot of tours. And so it just fit that I call it a bicycle tour company, even though people weren't paying for tours, they were paying just a party, that I would start to notice the historic markers.
Educate a little bit.
The historic markers aren't black or white. They're just the city's history. And so when we're passing by the downtown library, if you read the historic marker, you realize that it used to be a post office. Well, that's not Black history at all. That's just a cool fact. So when I'm passing the building, I can say does anybody know what that building used to be? And then I get to tell them it used to be the post office. And then they're like, wow, And so it never really started out as a Black history thing. It just was a way to be more engaging with the clientele. When we ride in Bossier, there aren't as many historic markers. So it's less to talk about when we're riding in Bossier. And Bossier is great because Bossier is completely flat. So if I have younger riders, we tend to ride in Bossier because it's an easier ride. If we've got people that are concerned that maybe they can't ride a bike very long or very far, I tend to steer them toward Bossier.
Stupid question, but it's going through my head, so I got to ask it. So when people sign up for a tour with you, if they don't have a bike, do they just meet you at a certain starting point?
So I provide all the bikes. Generally, if somebody books a tour, it's their party. It's their group, it's their party. And so if somebody wants to bring out their own bike, that's fine. If they need bikes, they will book how many bikes they need on the website.
And then you say tour starting at this time.
Usually they're picking their time.
Usually they're picking their time. This is where we're starting. This is where you meet me.
Normally it's a discussion.
Yeah.
Normally there's a discussion. So I'm trying to find out, is it somebody's birthday? Is it a wedding? Is it a family reunion? Just what? So the last one we did was New Year's Eve. And they were Christian. It was a Christian group. And they didn't want to go to a bar. They didn't want to go have drinks or anything like that. They just wanted to ride with their friends. So once I knew that, I said, well, let's ride in Bossier. And I've got pretty much, we'll meet in the East Bank or we'll meet around the heart of Bossier. Usually we'll meet in the heart of Bossier. That way we can ride into East Bank. So I've got pretty much a standard meetup spot, but it depends on the group. And generally, if they call, then we'll iron that out. But you can book totally online without discussing with me. All the information is there, whether you want to book in Shreveport, whether you want to book in Bossier, and the dates and the times. All of that's on the website, so you don't have to talk to me.
All right, so just going back to my previous question, the history you haven't lived, or this history that you've had to obtain or gather, talk to me a little bit about that process. Like, who has taught you that, or who have been your mentors, or who have been your sources?
Well, when we first got started, probably before I even did the first bike ride, I started riding with Bike Shreveport, which is a group that rides out of Highland. And I rode with them to just see what the bike culture was like in Shreveport. And at the same time, I was beginning to start Bossier Bike Night is what they call themselves. They're not a formal group, but they ride on Thursdays in Bossier. I rode with Bossier Bike Night. I was riding with Bike Shreveport to just learn sort of bike culture here in Shreveport. And then as I started learning, well, there's a lot of history in downtown, that's when I actually noticed Robert Trudeau's walking tour. And so I did take one walking tour with Robert Trudeau, and he opened up a whole new world in terms of what downtown looked like at different time periods. And so once you get that door open, then the rest is history. You can start, with Google and the internet. There's tons of resources out there for you to figure out bits and pieces of one story. And as you're reaching to learn about one story, you start to find out other stories. I had been by the Calanthian Temple. I've gone to Spring Street Museum. Spring Street Museum has been very helpful as well. And they have resources in Shreveport that people just are unaware of. And historians, when you meet historians, they love to research stuff. So when you can find the Spring Street Museum and you can meet the historians that they have, then you can email them about about different things, and they will help you do the research. And I also have a historian that works for Xavier University who's very, very nice, and I can send her an email and she'll go research stuff for me too. But because I have such a rich family history that goes back to the 1920s, I heard a lot of stories but didn't understand them. So when we were going by the Calanthian Temple and I was taking people by the Calanthian and telling the Calanthian story about how it was like an office hub where people had various businesses in there, specifically doctors' offices and law offices and business offices and oil field companies, as well as the nightlife. It wasn't until I read some of my own family history at home that I was able to put two and two together. Like, wow, my great grandfather's office was in the Calanthian. I did not know that. I didn't understand the story of how he became a pharmacist and a medical doctor. But once I was reading other people's history and then able to kind of put my history together where it made more sense. It's one thing for you to hear someone's a doctor, but then to actually understand the time frame of how.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one thing, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. One thing I've said to Robert before is, and I'm sure you remember this too, I mean, growing up, I remember having Louisiana history in 7th or 8th grade, but I don't really remember any Shreveport-Bossier history.
Oh, no.
And I think that's like, one thing we talk a lot about on this podcast is that we kind of struggle a little bit as a community and talking about who we are as a community, or honing in on our identity and being able to talk clearly about what our identity is. And I think some of that stems from the fact that most of us really don't know our history. And so one thing I've said to Robert, and Robert and I have talked about, is that I think it'd be really great, I don't know if this takes 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, but for a curriculum to be developed for all of our local people every year at a certain age, whether it's 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, whatever it is, to start learning about local history.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we're Shreveport and Bossier are one community, but we're also a very divided community. And so when people have different agendas, and people don't want to learn and people don't want to understand our history, they're okay with not telling it. And when people know the history and then some of the history has a racial component to it, a lot of people tend to shy away from it. And one thing about Robert Trudeau and his tours, he's talking about, the divide of Shreveport, and it's one thing for Robert Trudeau to talk about the divide of Shreveport, but then it's another thing for a Black person to talk about the divide of Shreveport. The average person from Shreveport doesn't want to talk about race relations. It makes them uncomfortable. And how are we going to solve our problems? How are we going to get over whatever the hump is if people are afraid to talk about the actual issues? And the more you learn about the history, Black people are all over it. White people are all over it too. And so we've got to figure out a way to tell these stories in a way where,
they're palatable, where people can hear them and take them in and do something with them.
Right. Because I didn't live in that time period, but it's well documented what that time period was like. And so I think Robert talks about, what he's researched in terms of what that time period was like, but I'm putting a new breath into it because I'm understanding the stories at a different level because the stories are being handed down to me in a different way. A lot of this stuff is not in a book. You're actually having to take maybe an obituary and put the history together based off of what the time periods were like. And so
fascinating.
Yes, very, very fascinating. Our Black history in and the Shreveport history and white history, whatever you want to call it, are intertwined. So to talk about my great-grandfather, Solomon Elijah Powell, they always talked about him being a pharmacist that became a medical doctor. And the story was that he was an apprentice, and they realized how smart he was, and they said, you should be a doctor. And it was always they. Who was they? I don't know who they was, but he actually worked at the Sanger drugstore that's on Louisiana Avenue right up the street. He was an apprentice at the Sanger drugstore, which was a 24-hour drugstore in the 1930s, in the 1920s or whatever. And so I started researching who the Sangers were, because I had heard that name before. And the Sanger brothers, who actually built movie theaters, they built those movie theaters after they left Shreveport. And they became millionaires, and they ended up selling all their movie theaters for millions of dollars before the Depression, and they rode off into the sunset. But they were Jewish men that had given my great-grandfather an opportunity to learn how to be a pharmacist. And that's nowhere in the Sanger's history. I had to know that he worked at their drugstore. And then he ended up graduating from Meharry and working at the Corinthian Temple, and then building his own building on Pierre Avenue. I have to know that, because that stuff's not in anybody's book. There's a couple of news clippings that if we don't have them, then maybe nobody has them. And so I'm telling these stories from a completely different perspective than Robert Trudeau, because he doesn't know any of these people. He doesn't know anybody that knows these people, but he knows what he's read, and he knows the time period. And so people actually have to start digging into the history and finding a love for it, so they can start understanding it. And when you start hearing about C.C. Antoine and what he did for the city of Shreveport, and actually making the charter to incorporate Shreveport as an actual city, has Black history tones to the city of Shreveport from its earliest stages. But when you're talking about building a curriculum, you probably never even heard these names. You may not have ever heard these names before. So there's definitely a opportunity for us to redevelop our education system, opportunity for us to interject facts into our curriculum. I actually grew up with, my dad's friends were Hillary Huckabee and Larry Ferdinand, and the people in Joe Shine, and the people that were on the very first city council. These were my, Robert Trudeau's talking about this history, and he's telling it. And these were like my childhood friends, growing up. Like, I know these people. And so it's a lot easier to tell the story and realize, well, what did he do? Mama, what did he do? And they're like, oh, well, they helped start the city council. Like, wow, okay, that is kind of a big deal. So I think that's kind of my perspective, and I think why people unique. Are gravitating to hear me start to tell those stories.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's important. All right, so I'm a zoom out a little bit with you. My next two questions are more, I just want to, we've been talking about this a little bit, but I want you to tell me, as you look out at Shreveport-Bossier as a whole, as a community, just talk to me about some of the things that concern you the most, just as you look at our community, and just what are some of the things that keep you up at night, or that trouble you, or that you wish were better?
Well, I work pretty hard, so when it's time to go to sleep, I fall right out. But
let's pause there. Let's tell them. So we were talking before we started. You do work hard, so you're currently working at SLB.
Right, I work at SLB.
3 12-hour shifts, every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Right.
SLB is one of the greatest new additions to our Shreveport-Bossier economy.
Absolutely. And so my perspective on the Shreveport-Bossier is actually pretty good. I know there's a lot of naysayers right now, but I remember a heyday. You know, I'm 47 years old, so I remember before the casinos. And so I remember the casinos. I remember GM. I remember when the oil field was booming. I remember when Texas Street was jumping, and I remember when the Red River District was jumping, and people were excited to come to Shreveport. Dallas was heavily in Shreveport. Houston was heavily in Shreveport. And Shreveport really truly was the anchor and the hub of the region. With what SLB is doing, with the opportunities that may be coming with the G Unit Studios. I know G Unit Studios isn't up and running yet, but in the near future, that influx of positivity goes a long way. And so right now I'm seeing the side of Shreveport that maybe a lot of people don't see, because SLB is on the forefront of some amazing things that are not going away. We're talking about data centers. We're talking about AI and back-end infrastructure that runs the internet.
And this is in the old GM plant,
That's the
right?
old GM
and for people
plant.
going SLB, what's he talking about? That is formerly Schlumberger, now SLB.
Correct. And so that the middle class, like when we talk about our economy, you know, the middle class has gotten smaller. But with good jobs and production jobs specifically, Shreveport is a transportation hub. So Shreveport will always be relevant because it's a transportation hub. Rail, freight, it comes through Shreveport. So one of the reasons why Atlanta, Georgia is so special is because it's literally the gateway to the East Coast. But that gateway to the East Coast still comes through Shreveport in a lot of ways. And so being at the foot of the Mississippi, these things matter. And so Shreveport has had some tough days, but we're actually on the verge of becoming, and I know, and it sounds crazy to a lot of people that may not have the awareness of what some of the things that are going on. Amazon coming was a big deal. They came because we are a transportation and a logistics hub. Places like the tire rack. The tire rack only has two facilities in the whole country, and one of them's in Shreveport. So people have to realize that Shreveport isn't nearly as bad as they think it is. But there are a lot of naysayers. But with SLB and its growth and G Unit and Amazon and things of that nature, and even more things to come, that middle class is going to start to get strong again. And as that middle class starts getting stronger again, you'll see the economy start expanding in this area. So I'm excited about that. So in terms of being kept up at night, I have to stay on the positive side of the tracks. I don't think people really understand the significance of Barksdale Air Force Base. That, you know, hopefully that's not something that's ever going away, but they are a humongous anchor. But because it's the military base, people don't really talk about it that much. But, you know, this is a place that people really and truly love. And you have to talk to out-of-town people, I think, to really realize that this is a great place. I meet out-of-town people all the time, and they love Shreveport. And if you meet someone from Dallas, they're like, oh my God, we love Shreveport. So it's the people that are here that give it the bad name. So if I would say something keeps me up at night or occasionally hurts my feelings, it's the negative attitude. No one is going to go to somewhere that everyone says stinks. When people come to Shreveport and they say, man, I'm here in Shreveport, where should I eat? Everybody tells them the same place. Everyone says, go to Orlando's. Go to Orlando's on the lake. Well, when you have everybody in the whole region saying, go to Orlando's on the lake, people show up. And it doesn't matter whether they're white or black or anything else. They're going to show up. Why? Because everyone told them to go there. And that's the sort of positivity that we need when people come to Shreveport and they say, well, what is there to do? Well, you should go to the casinos. Oh, you should take a bicycle tour. Oh, you should go to the aquarium. Oh, we've got a children's museum. Oh, you should go to Sideport. You should check these things out. Oh, go see a movie at the Boardwalk, or go bowling at All-Star Lanes. If people would do that, we would have a totally different dynamic here in Shreveport. And for me, I need people to see me as just a business and not a black business. You know, I miss out on 66% of my potential money because white people look at my business and say it's a black business and they don't want to do it. If white people were booking bicycle tours, I wouldn't have a black business. I would just have a business. And that's how you make money. McDonald's doesn't care who's spending their money. I don't care who's spending their money. I want everyone to spend their money, but I can't help the clientele that actually come in the door. I'm going to service the clientele that comes in the door every time. And I'm going to make sure that clientele has a good time. So whoever comes in, if it's a group of nuns, we're going to have a nun ride. And if it's a group of wrestlers, we're going to have a wrestler ride. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to provide a service. And that's to whoever comes in.
I love it. Well, Greg, those were my set questions. I told you before we started, we have all the time in the world. If there's anything else you want to share or anything else I didn't ask, I think you're doing such fascinating things. I absolutely love your perspective, and I'm all ears if there's anything else you want to dive into. Well,
I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit. I maybe didn't answer the question all the way when we were talking about the bus tours. The bus tours kind of came about because they wanted the tours and they wanted the information. And we're talking about the Shreveport-Bossier African American Chamber of Commerce. They wanted to do something for Martin Luther King Day. And they wanted
This was the first year they were doing this, right?
I don't know that they did bus tours at any other time. Mm-hmm. I heard that there was somebody else that did bus tours, but they contacted me and asked, could we do a tour without the bikes? And I said, well, yeah, we can do a tour without the bikes. The information is the same. And I was actually very excited to do it and thank the Chamber of Commerce for coming up with the idea, because it really opened up a new opportunity for the area. And every bus tour, we had one at 9 a.m., we had one at noon, we had one at 3 o'clock, and they were all, the 3 o'clock was completely full. The noon was full, and the only one that had any space was the 9 a.m., probably just because it was cold and it was that morning. But it opened up an opportunity for people like older, more seasoned citizens of our area to come and give and share, but also get the information. I think one thing that I did see from Robert Trudeau's tour that I really appreciated was that a tour isn't just about you hearing what the tour guide has to say. The tour is really about everyone bringing their perspective and almost having like an open discussion and dialogue about our history. And we need more people to come and be a part of it, because it could be a little small child that asks a question that only an older person has the answer to. Some things they're just not going to be in a book. So one lady did tell a story while we were on the tour. They were talking about when the Little Union church had gotten raided by the police, and she told a story about how they paid to get them out of jail with like coins, and some of this stuff it may be in a book and it may not be in a book, but just to hear someone else tell that story and give their perspective as to why is really interesting to hear. Like, okay, you're gonna take us to jail, you're gonna harass us in this way, and this is our little get back to you. We're gonna pay this in coins. So
they were paying in coins as a annoyance, as a way.
I don't know if
but that's the way you took it.
I took it as That, or it could have potentially been the other way around where they said, we're not going to take cash. You're going to have to give it to us in coins. So either way is harassment going on. And to really understand the harassment at all levels. And sometimes that makes people feel uncomfortable. But if that's what happened, that's what happened. How can we be better? How can we be better from the things of the past? So
yeah, I think so much of history is putting pieces together, and finding pieces maybe that have never been evident or visible before.
Correct. And when you have the group discussions, that's the type of thing that comes out. So bicycle
tell me a
season.
few of the places you went on the. So Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King, if I'm not mistaken, was in Shreveport. They say 3 times.
He documented 3 times.
And tell me some of the landmarks that you visited on the tour, if you wouldn't mind.
So he went to the Old Galilee, which is very well documented, and you can find that pretty much with ease on the internet. So he went to the Old Galilee,
which is still standing.
And it's right
still operational.
It's just a building. It's going to be a museum. They don't have a set date for it to become a museum, but it's right next to the police station downtown. So the Old Galilee Baptist Church, and it has a historic marker outside. And we went by Little Union Baptist Church,
which is still open and operational.
Correct. That is an open and operational church, and they have a Black History Trail marker on the outside of their church, and they also have a historic marker on their church as well.
During the tour, did you go inside any of these places?
We didn't go inside, but on future tours, we will start to go in Little Union. So Little Union was one of the places that we stopped by, and we also passed by Evergreen Baptist Church. So those
is that operational still?
That's an operational church as well.
Okay.
So those were the 3 times that he came to Shreveport. We also stopped by the old Freeman and Harris building, and we also stopped by where the Castle Hotel building used to stand, because there's nothing there where the Castle Hotel. So the Castle Hotel is
that in Allendale? Where's the Castle?
That's downtown.
Okay.
That's it's pretty close to where the G Unit Studios are going to be, because it's on Sprague Street. Okay. It's right by Oaklawn Cemetery.
Okay.
So it's in that area that's being kind of revitalized. And Sprague Street is on the edge of what they used to call St. Paul's Bottoms. So that area is being revitalized right now. And so there's nothing there because there were fires and whatnot that took all those structures out. But that was the Castle Hotel, which they called it a hotel, but it was basically a glorified, house.
Is there a marker for the castle?
There's no marker there. There's no marker. So you have to know exactly where that spot is. And so that is a place where Black people were able to stay when they came in Shreveport. It stated that that's where the railroad workers would stay, but Dr. King was documented as staying there because he didn't want to stay at someone's house because he was afraid that maybe somebody else might have been put in harm's way when he came to Shreveport. So those were a few of the stops on the Black History Tour, and there's like 40 odd stops that we can make on the historic markers in terms of Black history. I'm not sure how many historic markers there are in general, but just Black history stops in the city of Shreveport, downtown Shreveport, there are about 40 markers of significant Black-owned businesses or things where significant Black stories can be told.
40 important locations that aren't necessarily marked, but 40 important. No,
locations. these are probably marked.
Okay.
Like the Calanthian Temple is marked. Freeman and Harris is marked. So a lot of these places have historic markers on them, but there's not really a good source to locate them. I have a link for Northwestern State has a website that has them kind of listed out. But that's the only one that I know of. But you can kind of piece it together from some different, a couple of different sites in terms of where you might want to go in terms of Shreveport history or Black history, if you will.
Well, anything else, Greg? I mean, love sitting down with you. You have such a unique and important perspective. Anything else you want?
Well, bicycle season is pretty much closed down November, December, January, and February. We tend to pick back up. Hopefully, we are going to have more bus tours available in February, bus tours available in June, and you can pretty much go on the website, find me if you want to book something specific at any time. I'm available to host tours. I like for people to contact me with what they want to do, as opposed to me always trying to set something up. But I love to be able to jump in for your church group, for your youth group, so that it's on your schedule. You don't have to get on my schedule. I'm more than willing to accommodate whatever schedule that a group might have. So that's how I prefer it. But the website is up for you to get on the calendar and book, whether you want a bicycle tour or whether you just want to do a bus tour, not a walking tour. Shreveport is too spread out to do a walking tour and hit the significant stops. Robert Trudeau does a walking tour, but he has a wealth of information, but you can only go so far on a walking tour, and Shreveport is really hilly, so the buses really came in handy for that. And it was exciting because you had so many people bringing their families to get that information. And something you said earlier about the education system, half of the families that came out with their children were homeschooling. And I thought that was very, very telling on the types of people that want to homeschool their children and see to it that they're giving their children real experiences. And we did have Caddo Parish, students there, but you know how many students are in Caddo Parish. We only had a very small amount of those students there compared to the amount of homeschooled students there with their parents and their family. So I would love to have the opportunity to take Caddo Parish, Bossier Parish out on these type of tours. So it's all about who you know and who you're connected with. So if there's anybody out there, history teachers, if there's any body that has any wherewithal with the school system to help set up and facilitate some tours like that, we are 100% available.
SB Rides.
SB Rides.
Greg Powell, really appreciate you. Loved having you, and I appreciate you sharing so much of your wisdom with us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.